Legal analysis, attorney and political analyst Andrew Lieb, and senior contributor for The Federalist, Ben Weingarten. Gentlemen, welcome. Andrew, you first. So far, each indictment or raid, every abuse of power by the Democrats, has been met with rising poll numbers for President Trump. Left-wingers were counting on the ignorance of some folks about the law and our rights. Legally speaking, aren't the majority of these charges across the board so plainly absurd that even legal laymen like me can understand how vacuous they are?
Chris, you bring up such a great point that there's going to be lots of problems with lots of the charges, and we're already seeing Mark Meadows test that out. On Monday, he's having a hearing about whether this is going to be removed to federal court. We will say that that's telling because we saw a similar thing when Trump tried to remove his own case from New York to federal court before SDNY, and that was remanded. But this is going to be very interesting. There's going to be a hearing. We're told Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State from Georgia, is going to be subpoenaed at this hearing, and a lot of evidence is going to be uncovered there. I'm one that always says in law, we wait till we see the evidence, and Monday is going to be a telling day, Chris, to see if these charges have any water that they're holding.
Fair enough. Ben, we now have mugshots of so-called co-defendants in this case. Rudy Giuliani summarizing the situation perfectly when he arrived for his booking. Take a look.
Fani Willis will go down in American history having conducted one of the worst attacks on the American Constitution ever. She has violated people's First Amendment right to advocate the government, to petition the government for grievances, like an election they believe was poorly conducted or falsely conducted. People have a right to believe that in America.
Yeah. So here is Giuliani complaining that attorneys are being criminalized for doing what attorneys are supposed to do, represent their clients. Pretty accurate. And what are your thoughts on that?
They are criminalizing contesting elections while Republican. They're criminalizing having the gall to actually ask questions about the integrity of elections. They're criminalizing seeking competent and zealous counsel in contesting elections while Republican. It's an utter and brazen assault on the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. It's an assault on the rule of law itself. This and the three other cases are all meant to show us one message plainly, which shows you that these are persecutorial efforts, not prosecutions. They want to show you that if you hold the wrong ideas and if you dare actually challenge the ruling regime, then you could be thrown in jail. That is the chilling message that's being sent to tens of millions of Americans. That is why the poll numbers go up every time, because everyone sees that this is not ultimately about Trump at the end of the day. It's about the liberty and justice of all Americans and the evisceration of our system that is being attempted right now by the ruling elites.
I think it's pretty fair to evaluate it that way, and I have said this in the past. I think a healthy chunk of Democrats no longer wish to be Americans anymore. They no longer wish to adhere to that Constitution and the protections it provides for our people and the limits it provides on government. Andrew, the House Judiciary Committee announcing they are launching an investigation into Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and whether she coordinated with Merrick Garland's corrupt Department of Injustice in indicting President Trump. If they can prove collusion, what could that mean for the aptly named Fani Willis and the charges she brought?
Well, if they proved collusion, the charges would be thrown out completely, and there'd probably be sanctions brought against Fani. But it depends how we define collusion. Are we talking about coordination or true collusion? Coordination's not going to get that far. Collusion, that's a disaster, Chris, for Fani Willis. And you know, I have something else for Fani Willis. You see, we had Alvin Bragg in New York try and fight a similar investigation by Jim Jordan. Do you remember that one? And what happened was the courts stepped in, Chris, and the court said, oh, no, Alvin Bragg, you have to comply. They shot down his TRO. So people are saying, what is Fani's next chance? Her next chance is complying with Jim Jordan. They have an oversight responsibility. He raised 4 good issues of why he wants to understand what's going on. But as I say again, let's see what the evidence uncovers. Let's see the docs she provides. She has till September 7th to provide those docs. Let's hope she does it. Otherwise, we're going to see a subpoena and court action.
Ben, I've got 1 minute left. In this case, and by the way, was mentioned, Alvin Bragg was just mentioned, Fani Willis. Alvin Bragg tried to do the same thing that Fani Willis is trying to do, giving herself a promotion saying she has a right to charge federal crimes, while at the same time she's insisting that the trial stay in her state instead of being kicked up to the federal courts. Can she have it both ways, number one? And should Trump's legal team follow Mark Meadows' footsteps and basically try to kick this up to the federal courts?
Well, yeah, and this also follows the chicanery of having a grand jury for Jack Smith conduct its work in the most hostile jurisdiction, hostile venue of Washington, D.C., and then bringing the case in Florida. And by the way, all of that chicanery, the machinations that you're talking about here, just further illustrates how hyper-political this all is. These are frothing mad prosecutors who are trying to shoehorn constitutionally protected conduct into statutes never before applied, and I'm speaking as a non-lawyer here, but never before applied to go after a president and indict him at the local level and at the federal level as well. All of this is unprecedented. All of this brought in several years into an election by his successor's Justice Department, in part, in the case of the Jack Smith indictments, and all of it stinks, reeks of politics, and it's the kind of thing you can't have in a first world nation, because what it shows us is they want to lock up political opponents, and everything about it is political. If you were going to indict a former president, a leading candidate, it better be ironclad cases. And that's why it's never been done before, by the way, and that's why so many Americans, millions of Americans, are alarmed by it.
Andrew Lieb, Ben Weingarten. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Texas dad is kicked out of a school board meeting